terrorists in Gaza as trophies. Such a word, just as Russia has captured thousands of Ukrainian children during its aggression against Ukraine. And the second is backing off what is going on. Iran can't say it has nothing to do with what is going on in Ukraine if it sells shaheeds to Russia. Iran can't say it has nothing to do with what is going on in Israel if its officials claim the support of what is going on in Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, how far can such evil go? No further than we allow it to. Our unity must and can stop the evil. Our desire for peace, not their desire for blood, should determine how the world lives. Our rule-based international order, and not their attempts to make death a rule. Sometimes terrorist leaders say, what are the rules on which the international order is based? As if they do not understand. And these are very simple rules, very simple. Do not rape women. Do not kill. Do not consider children as trophies. Do not fill cities and villages with blood. And do not shoot cars with civilians. Do not hit peaceful cities with missiles and drones. And one more rule, under any circumstances, we must bring to justice all terrorists and all those who help them. Isn't the power of the world enough to stop the evil? I'm sure it is. And now everyone in the world who values life and international peace needs to be as active as possible. This is not the time to withdraw from the international arena into internal disputes. This is not the time to isolate ourselves. This is not the time to remain silent or pretend that terror on one continent does not affect global affairs. Everyone can help prevent the chasm between the world and peace from widening. Europe should be active. The United States should be active. China, India, Arab states should feel how much can collapse if they allow terrorists to achieve their goals. Turkey, Brazil, and all of Latin America, Japan, Australia, Canada, African countries, Central Asian countries, Korea, Pakistan, Indonesia, the Caribbean, the Pacific states, everyone should be active in the defense of life and international law. We must not give terror a single chance. Ukraine is grateful to everyone who has supported us in our defense against terror. And I thank every country, every leader, all the nations that are with us. Those who help us with air defense and everything else. This is especially important now, before the winter, which Russia will try to make painful for us. And I thank all of you who are working with us to implement the peace formula. All areas of our cooperation lead to one thing: to ensure that the UN Charter is fully effective in protecting Ukraine and our entire Europe from terror and aggression. And if it works here, it will work anywhere in the world. If there are real global sanctions for any sponsorship of terror, terror will lose. If the world unites whenever someone takes women hostage and kidnap the children of another nation, terror will have no allies. If the one attacked by terrorists receives all the weapons it needs to protect its people, international law will be the only force that will determine how the world lives. And the world will live in peace. This is our common goal. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge your states and parliaments to be even more active for the sake of global unity. Let everyone who sponsors terror feel the power of our rest and let everyone who needs help defending themselves against terror feel the power of our solidarity. We must all be able to promise our children that we will leave them a world ruled not by blood shed by evil, but by freedom guaranteed by law. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks for support. Slava Ukraini. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Mr. President, we respect you a lot and thank you for your remarks and thank you for speaking to us today. I would like to add on behalf of our Assembly, Slava Ukraini! Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, second important guest from Ukraine. It's now my pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Ruslan Stefanchuk, Chairman of the Verkhovna Rada. Dear Ruslan, it is always a pleasure to see you. You are at the home in this assembly. Over the past 3 days, we have again strengthened our support for the Verkhovna Rada and we have reaffirmed our unwavering support for Ukraine until victory. Mr. Chairman, you now have the floor.
Dear Madam Prime Minister, dear colleagues and friends, first of all, I would like to thank my dear colleague, the chairman of Folketing of Denmark, Mr. Søren Gade, for the invitation to come to Copenhagen. Unfortunately, I had to change the participation format. However, I am convinced that our delegation will represent the Ukraine Parliament with dignity and responsibility in these difficult times. Nevertheless, I am pleased to address the esteemed Parliamentary Assembly. I would like to start by thanking the outgoing President, Ms. Garion Mayram, dear Joël. I'm glad that Ukraine has such a reliable friend, and I appreciate that under your presidency, the Assembly adopted many greatly important decisions for the future of Ukraine. I also look forward to congratulating the new president, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, who will lead the Assembly in the face of serious challenges for the European Atlantic community. And I wish the new president strength and persistence. And of course, I convey my heartfelt gratitude to the entire Assembly for your unwavering support to my country against the backdrop of Russia's unjust and brutal full-scale invasion, which has already been ongoing for almost 20 months. But before I share my thoughts with you on the matter of Euro-Atlantic cooperation and unity, let me express words of solidarity with Israel people and state who have suffered a brutal terrorist attack. Evil, no matter where it manifests itself in aggression against Ukraine or attack on Israel, must be punished in all its formats. Dear friends, I'm sure you are keeping a close eye on the Ukrainian counteroffensive and the difficulties our armed forces are facing. Russians have built strong defense lines and mined large areas. This seriously deters the gradual advancement to the Ukraine armed forces. I'm confident that everyone in this room wishes Ukraine to win, wishes Europe to win, wishes democracy to win. But from the other side, Russia still hopes to win this war of attrition. Ukrainians are ready for such a development, who are stable and united. We will not give up our choice to be part of the democratic world. I know that the democratic world is just as ready to support Ukraine. I know that you are aware that losing the war will mean further aggression and the expansion of the dictatorship. Therefore, I believe that we will increase efforts for joint victory. This assembly also contributes to victory. I am convinced that parliaments must find the basis for the future security pillars of the world. This is our task as representatives of our voters. I'm glad that the Parliamentary Assembly, during its last plenary in Luxembourg, recognized Ukraine's significant contribution to Euro-Atlantic security. You emphasized that Ukraine's rightful place was in the Euro-Atlantic family and called on the Vilnius summit to agree on the next significant step towards Ukraine's NATO membership. My words of thanks are also to the national parliaments, which also made their calls in support of Ukraine's membership in NATO. After the NATO summit in Vilnius, we should already start thinking about how we will together approach the NATO summit in Washington. Our goal is to achieve maximum progress and to be invited to join NATO at the next summit, where the alliance will celebrate its 75th anniversary. We encourage allies to reach a consensus on this matter. I call on everyone in this room to contribute to building such a consensus. Every voice matters. In this regard, we will appreciate the consolidated voting of the Assembly, encouraging the allied government to support the decision to invite Ukraine to join NATO at the Washington summit. Dear colleagues, we know that our pace to NATO is going through the reforms. In line with the spirit of the Vilnius summit decisions, we remain committed to the reforms agenda, which helps Ukraine move forward to NATO membership and strengthen our defense capabilities and interoperability with the alliance. Of course, the first thing we talk about is the implementation of NATO standard by the armed forces of Ukraine. Everyone understands today that the Ukrainian armed force is modern army that is being transformed directly on the battlefield. On the other hand, that complies with the standards of democracy and human rights. This is where we are moving and achieving reforms that are not only required for the joining NATO or the European Union, but also the ones that Ukrainians need. Dear friends, I wish you a fruitful plenary session, and I strongly believe that one of the next session of the Assembly will be held in Ukraine. You remember that this was our initial plan, but due to hard circumstances, including the Russian invasion, we had to postpone it twice. So I invite you to Ukraine right now, and I am sure that the necessary conditions for such a session will be met very, very soon. Thank you all for your attention, and glory to Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!
Glory to Ukraine and Slava Ukraini. For sure, our assembly will come to Kiev one day, and we will have our session in this beautiful city of Ukraine. I would like to thank also for the presence of the Ukrainian delegation here in Copenhagen. We had a very good meetings at the standing committee and at the committee meetings. I would like to thank Yehor, Solomia and other part of the delegation for the excellent work and for cooperation. We will have a great resolution on Ukraine that will be adopted today. Thank you, Ruslan, and thank you for your presence. Now it's time to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Mircea Joannou, the Deputy Secretary General of NATO. Mircea, I want to thank you for your active engagement with our Assembly, which we greatly appreciate. Our exchanges are even more important at this crucial time when we must remain steadfast in our support for Ukraine and continue to profound adaptation of our alliance. So, Mircea, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, dear Mikhail. Mr. Speaker, Excellencies, General Lavigne, ladies and gentlemen, it is my greatest pleasure to be with you all today. I always feel at home with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly as a former delegate myself. Secretary General, myself and our teams were looking forward to interacting with all of you also in the future. I would like to thank our host, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, the Danish Parliament, and the Danish delegation. Denmark indeed plays a key role in our alliance. Your fighter jets patrol the east of the alliance. Your Danish troops are deployed on the eastern flank. You contribute importantly to our maritime deployments from the high north to the Mediterranean. And you're a driving force behind NATO's innovation agenda. Indeed, Secretary General Stoltenberg was recently here with Prime Minister Frederiksen to speak at the conference on quantum and to open a NATO deep tech lab for quantum technologies as part of Diana. Denmark also provides Ukraine with vital economic and military aid. NATO has, is, and will always rely on Denmark. Now, a few words also from our side to the situation in Israel. We are shocked and appalled by the terrorist attacks by Hamas against our NATO partner, the State of Israel. Over the last 2 days, we have seen thousands of rockets fired into Israel, indiscriminate attacks on civilians, as well as mass kidnapping. I utterly condemn these unjustifiable and murderous acts. Our thoughts are with the victims, their loved ones, and the people of Israel. Israel has a right and responsibility to defend itself and its citizens. I'm also deeply concerned that the citizens of many other countries, including several NATO allies, are among the killed, wounded, or kidnapped ones. The national authorities concerned are doing all they can to help their citizens in such a difficult situation. I was in Israel just 2 weeks back. I met the President, the Prime Minister, the government. I met the young entrepreneurs. I met the people of Israel. I know that they have all the energy and the talent, and the future of Israel will continue to be bright. And I know that this country will overcome this difficult situation, and thank all the other leaders who have expressed the same words of condemnation and support. It was also an honor to follow President Zelensky and my good friend Ruslan Stefanchuk, the chairman of the Verkhovna Rada, in this meeting here in Copenhagen. Last week, I chaired a meeting of the new NATO-Ukraine Council, where we're working together as equals to take forward decisions taken at the Vilnius summit, and indeed preparing the decisions for the Washington summit of next year. Later this week, the NUC will meet for the first time at the level of defense ministers with Minister Umerov. The free world stands with Ukraine, NATO stands with Ukraine, and I stand with Ukraine. The rightful place, thank you. And I hear only the same words of commitment from all of us, that the rightful place of Ukraine as an independent sovereign nation is with the Euro-Atlantic family and as a full member of our alliance. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is heading towards its second winter, and our continued support is more important than ever. From air defenses for their cities and infrastructure, to fuel, food and warm clothing for their people, we will not waver. For to do so would hand Putin and the forces of tyranny a huge and terrifying victory. Putin wants to wipe Ukraine from the map. And why? For the delusional idea of recreating a great Russian empire. Spheres of influence and wars of aggression have no place in the 21st century. So we must support the fearless Ukrainian forces in their defense of freedom and liberty, also of our freedom and liberty. Together, allies have provided Ukraine with tens of billions worth of high-end military equipment, from anti-tank weapons to advanced artillery, as well as tanks, missiles, and air defense systems, and soon F-16s. I'd like to thank Denmark and the Netherlands and many other allies for leading these efforts. Through NATO's comprehensive assistance plan, allies have also pledged over 500 million euros for short-term critical non-lethal aid, including fuel, winter clothing, medical supplies, and demining equipment. At the Vilnius summit this year, allies have also agreed a comprehensive program for ensuring that the Ukrainian armed forces are becoming fully interoperable with NATO. This is a strong and enduring message of hope for the troops on the front lines, for the millions of Ukrainian families displaced from their homes, and for the children of Ukraine who deserve to grow up in a free country, able to follow their dreams and live the lives they choose. Ukraine is pressing forward. Every meter Ukraine regains is a meter that Russia loses. And success is more important than speed. The war is not only a threat to Ukraine, but also to our own security in Europe and to the entire rule-based international order. So in response to a dangerous world, we are massively boosting our own deterrence and defense, including with new defense plans, 300,000 troops on higher readiness, backed by substantial air and naval power, and multinational battle groups stationed from Estonia all the way to Romania and Bulgaria. We are also ramping up the production of weapons and ammunition, through the NATO Support and Procurement Agency, which, by the way, is lending technical support for a similar agency in Ukraine as we speak. Allies and partners have signed contracts worth of 2.4 billion euros to increase ammunition stocks, including 1 billion euros of firm orders. We are investing far more in defense. 2023 will be the 9th consecutive year of defense spending increases across European allies and Canada. We expect a real increase of 8.3%, the biggest increase in decades. 11 allies now spend 2% of GDP on defense, a number that will rise next year. Indeed, at the NATO summit in Vilnius in July, all allies committed to spending at least 2% to step up their efforts immediately. We are also stepping up our deterrence on all fronts, countering disinformation, cyber and other hybrid attacks, strengthening the resilience of our societies and our critical infrastructure, including undersea critical infrastructure. And we are aggressively investing in new technologies. I chair the Innovation Board in NATO, working with industry, with startups, with academia, and the whole innovation ecosystem to maintain our technological edge and drive a digital transformation of our militaries. And together with Diana, we are very proud that we are the first organization to put forward and to launch a multinational sovereign venture capital fund, which is the innovation fund of NATO, the first of its kind. And not the size of the fund is important, but the signal we send to our startups, our young innovators, all across this great alliance of ours. And I also want to recognize here one of NATO's strategic commands, Allied Command Transformation, ACT Norfolk, Virginia, which is leading NATO's digital transformation. And let me use this opportunity to recognize a great military leader, General Philippe Lavigne, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Transformation, who you will hear from later. Cher Philippe, mon général, tous nos appréciations.
Philippe, my General, we recognize your work.
We have just published strategies on artificial intelligence and autonomy. We are working on ones for other key technologies, quantum, biotechnology, human enhancement, space, new materials, and every single new policy from NATO on emerging disruptive technologies are having and will always have an ethical dimension of their use. Together with the European Union and other partners around the world, we can set the standards, not only for us keeping the technological edge, but to be able to make sure that our democratic values and societies are reflected in the way we use these technologies, particularly in national security and defense. European Union is a key partner. Other nations and organizations are partners in this great effort. As we head towards the next summit, our anniversary summit in Washington, D.C. in next July, we'll continue to further strengthen our support to Ukraine, boost our deterrence and defense, follow through on allies' new commitments on defense spending, and work more closely and more practically with our partners. NATO is and will always be a regional alliance, but we face global challenges. So our partnerships are a vital part of our security. Here in Europe, the Republic of Moldova and Georgia have Russian troops on their soil without their consent, while they and Bosnia and Herzegovina suffer intense disinformation campaigns, electoral interference, and cyber attacks at Russia's hand. All the tools of hybrid warfare that are deployed also against NATO allies and our democracies. In Kosovo, tensions remain high. In May, 93 KFOR troops were injured during protests in northern Kosovo. Last month, a Kosovo police officer was killed. This is totally unacceptable. Violence risks setting back the whole region. In response, NATO has deployed hundreds of additional troops to Kosovo, including from the United Kingdom and Romania. KFOR works to maintain a safe and secure environment and freedom of movement for all communities in Kosovo. To the south, Our partners in Africa and the Middle East face the ever-present threat of terrorism, but also a growing Russian and Chinese influence. And further afield, we are developing far closer ties to our partners in the Indo-Pacific region to counter strategic competition from China. Next year would also mark 30 years since the establishment of our Mediterranean Dialogue format and 20 years since the establishment of our Istanbul Cooperation format. We have to pay a special attention to our partnerships, focusing on the South, as we also have to help our vulnerable partners. The Washington Summit will have a strong emphasis on our partnerships, as we should do. I want to thank each of you, and through you, your national parliaments, and through you, to your citizens, for strengthening this alliance, for investing in our interests and defense, for supporting Ukraine, and standing with our partners. As parliamentarians, you shape the debate, you hold your governments to account. In many cases, you control the purse strings. We cannot do this without your support. Earlier this year, you ratified accession to NATO of Finland. Thank you for that. And we look forward, and we are working relentlessly to welcoming Sweden into our alliance soon. Later this month, in yet another example of how Sweden is integrating into our alliance, it will host the NATO Industry Forum in Stockholm. One of Putin's aims in fighting this war was to have less NATO. He has failed utterly. Instead, he has achieved the exact opposite, dramatically more NATO. Dear friends, we face a fundamental challenge, not only to our nations and our peoples, but also to our values, to the things that make us who we are. We are not a military alliance. We're not even a political military alliance. We are a fundamental alliance based on our values of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. This is what we are. This you all should defend. And this is something that also authoritarian regimes see our values not only something to aspire to, but also as a threat. That's why a free and democratic Ukraine is a direct threat to Putin's regime. Many of you in this room, especially from the newer members, not everyone is a founding member like Denmark or Norway, and I'm happy that Sweden, Finland are coming to join the other two Nordic nations. But many of us, including myself, from the newer members, we have lived under the Iron Curtain. We know what tyranny, dictatorship, and communism is all about. We should tell more directly to our young generations that this is the most appalling experience a human being can be exposed to. Never, never again. And I think my friends from the newer member states of our alliance will be telling this story, as I know it as our newest member, Finland, and soon Sweden, will tell also our partners in the South why they really decided, after years or centuries of neutrality, to join our alliance and to counter the propaganda and fake news that Russia is spreading all around about this. Living in open, free, democratic societies is a blessing, and this alliance is also about protecting our way of life. So thank you so much for everything you do. I wish Mikhail the best of success, and I know that the Q&A will be always merciless, like always. Thank you so much.
Mr. Deputy Secretary General and dear Mircea, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for putting the meaning of partnerships very high. I want to say that yesterday the Standing Committee has decided to strengthen our partnerships in many aspects. So we follow your recommendation. And now, anyone who would like to ask the Deputy Secretary General a question after his address, please raise your hand as soon as possible. I should warn you that we already have a large number of questions. It is highly unlikely that I will be able to go through all the questions. I will set a 1.5 minute time limit for questions, and I encourage you to keep your questions as short as possible so that more delegates can participate, and the questions will end at 11:35. We will start the question session. The first is Nicu Falcoi, Romania, Vice President.
În primul rând, bună ziua și mă bucur să vă revăd. Dear Mr. Deputy Secretary General, NATO has the first alliance to develop its concept of ensuring military technological superiority in the face of hybrid threats, developments of disruptive technologies, and the development of strategic industrial partnership with competitors such as China. The alliance has been at the forefront of the race of maintain a strategic advantage in various cutting-edge areas. The war in Ukraine and the latest incident at the borders of Romania and Moldova regarding the debris of fallen missiles and drones raised the following question. All allies that share a border with Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova as a partner face the need to develop an integrated and interoperable alert system for threats against vectors such as drones or drone debris. What can NATO do about it? How can we better coordinate with Ukraine to reduce the risk of these drone debris? Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. I'll group the questions, and I will ask for the next three questions. Julie Jerovic, Canada, Head of Delegation, Mimi Kodeli, Albania, Head of Delegation, and Theo Frankel, Belgium, Head of Delegation. Julie.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. And I just want to start off by also indicating very strongly that Canada unequivocally condemns the multi-front terrorist attack against Israeli citizens by Hamas. As Prime Minister Fredriksson said this morning, there's absolutely nothing that justifies this violence. So wanted to start off with that. Deputy Secretary General, thank you so much for being with us today. It means a lot to us to have you here with us. We know that in July, the Black Sea grain deal was not continued. And we know that food insecurity continues to increase. And my question to you is, can you talk to us about what steps are being taken to find a way to move forward on finding a new Black Sea grain deal? Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Mimi and Theo.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Deputy Sec Gem. I'm very pleased to have you here again. Well, first of all, I would like to admit that Albania firmly condemned the barbarian terrorist attacks on the Israelis, and we are all together, same will to fight against terrorism. As we are talking terrorism, I think that terrorist attacks happen in our region as well. Not far from here, not far from today. So I will come to the question. As we all know, NATO has added more KFOR troops on the Kosovo territory. In my opinion, we are present with troops everywhere just because we failed diplomacy, negotiations, talks, discussions. So we fail human approach. After so many years, I would like to have, instead of shrinking, instead of shrinking the number of troops, we're adding more troops in the Balkans. So more precisely in Kosovo territory. So do you have any plan? It's my question. And if so, to share with us for how many more years this mission will stand, and we need more and more troops rather than, going on the other direction, just having less and less troops there, so we can solve the problems in a very peaceful way as we all would like to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Secretary General. Thank you for your speech and your warm words of support for Ukraine and Israel. And Belgium absolutely condemns the awful terrorist attacks from Hamas to innocent Israeli citizens, women, children, cruel attacks of the last days. President Zelensky, he said today, we need to keep fighting against evil, Deputy Secretary General. And he made a parallel between Ukraine and Israel. It brought the president to one crucial insight: the evil role of the Ayatollah regime in Iran. They are delivering shaheeds to Russia. They are financing terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. And I ask you in Luxembourg, and I ask you again, when will NATO take a firm stance against the Islamic Republic of Iran? We need to put the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, on the terror list. We need to increase sanctions against the IRGC and this cruel regime of Ayatollahs and mullahs. What is the stance of NATO in this Iran question? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the questions. First of all, thank you for reconfirming our strong support for Israel and the condemnation of these terrorist and murderous attacks. To Nicu Fălcoi, and thank you so much, mulțumesc pentru întrebare. In Vilnius, our leaders also approved, upon the exceptional work of our military commanders, the most ambitious and transformative deterrence and defense planning, force structure, command and control, multi-domain operations, including air and missile defense systems. And I applaud our Baltic allies for encouraging and pushing forward for also a rotational air and missile defense systems, especially on the eastern flank. So my answer is that now we have to make those plans executable, implementing them, putting also the money where our mouth is, and making sure that our military leaders and also our political leaders, all of us, are basically just implementing what we decided. The three regional plans, Nordic, Central Europe, and Southern Europe, and in the case of Romania and the Black Sea, that's Black Sea and Mediterranean Sea. We are working with Admiral Munch, we are working with our SACEUR, we are working with governments in the region. I also want to applaud the decisions by Italy in their battle group they lead in Bulgaria, and our French allies in what they do in Romania, because this Black Sea situation continues to be complex. So my answer is we have to invest more, and if we fully implement our regional plans, all these concerns that are legitimate will be taken care. And this is something I know that my home country of Romania will also be actively participating in. Julie, thank you so much for the question on the Black Sea grain deal and the. You know, Russia is such a systematic, barbaric player that we know that in wintertime they try to destroy the energy infrastructures of Ukraine, and in summertime they try to destroy another big component of its national security and also its economy, which is the agro-industrial production and exports. So this is why NATO and allies have stepped up our surveillance over the Black Sea, including with patrol aircraft, reconnaissance drones. We also welcome Turkey's constant efforts to revitalize the grain deal, of course with the support of UN, and also the massive supports by allies in the region, Romania, Bulgaria, and others, that are making significant efforts to substitute the volumes of the Black Sea grain exports through land railroad, and Danube. And there's no surprise, knowing the pattern of Russian behavior or misbehavior, that they are attacking the Ukrainian Danube, maritime Danube ports. And that's why also in Romania, neighboring Romania, and also neighboring Bulgaria, there are these issues. So we constantly try to help allies mobilize their resources and provide them with ISR, intelligence, and the protection they need. Also, I'd like to thank the European Union for being such an active part in making sure that alternative routes are available to our Ukrainian friends and their exports. From our friends from Albania, first of all, let me remind all the colleagues of the massive Iranian attacks against Albania when they are hosting a meeting of the opposition to the Iranian regime. This leads also to the next question. And this is also an indication why we should do a much better job as NATO to strengthen our cyber defenses. And that's why we created new political instruments in NATO, not only the 3rd foreign ministers meeting per year, informal, but also a national cyber coordinators meeting every year, massively important. For the first time ever, a national resilience coordinators annual meeting in NATO. And also we're very happy that the national security advisors of NATO are meeting once a year. So just to tell you that we are looking into this. When it comes to K4, of course, it's frustrating to see that after decades, basically, the situation in the region becomes remains so fragile. But our role as K4, and by the way, we are the 3rd responder there. It's EULEX, and of course the authorities there. And I want to thank again UK and Romania for deploying additional 600 troops. And these are only prudent steps for K4 to have the forces, capabilities, and flexibility necessary to fulfill our UN mandate, and also to maintain. And this is something we are very, very much insisting on. And now there is a new commander of K4 that is taking command over, I think, this very week. And our Italian allies have done this before, and our Turkish allies will be doing this. Also, Denmark has been doing Iraq for us brilliantly a few years back. So what we're trying to make sure is that we keep our impartiality in the eyes of the local population. There's no other solution than de-escalation and the EU-led facilitated dialogue for finding a durable solution. It's not up to NATO to decide on the political side, but we'll stay with K4 as long as it takes, and adapting our force according to the situation. And we hope to achieve lasting peace and stability for all communities in Kosovo. And as a Romanian this time, I know, as I mentioned for Ukraine and for the Republic of Moldova and for Georgia, that their place is with us. The full Western Balkans should also be with us as full-fledged members of the European and Euro-Atlantic family, and I know this will take place. Sooner or later this will take place. This is the solution, to have all of us, all of our democracies together, irrespective of how difficult sometimes the scars of the past will be there with us. To our Belgian friends, I think President Zelensky put it quite convincingly, like always. And of course, we are concerned about Iran's destabilizing activity, its support for terrorists. As you know, we have a NATO mission in Iraq that is also very, very important to our Iraqi partners. And it's clear that his nuclear program is of utmost concern. So we call on Iran to fulfill its legal obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, support for sanctions. And let me tell you something which is outside of the script that Zilke is pushing me. There is also something quite important happening in the Middle East. And this is something that NATO doesn't have a direct role into, but we are cognizant of the fact that the Abraham Accords is a massive transformation of the regional architecture and I'm not here to have suppositions, but I'm just know, while visiting Israel recently and seeing the meeting between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu on the UN General Assembly margins, that the idea of a deal between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the US would also be a game changer. And this is probably also one of the calculations of Iran in making sure that this thing does not happen. It's not up to me to speculate, but I'm just saying that this is something which is also a massive potential transformation of the architecture in the Middle East. And thank you for, also I remember the question in Luxembourg. In Sofia, we'll see what will happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mircea. And now we'll go to the next group of speakers. The first is Jerry Connolly, United States, our former president of NATO PA. Second is Andronius Azubalis, Lithuania. And third, Ante Bacic from Croatia. Jerry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Chair, welcome back. And let me just say how much we appreciate your commitment to and support for and advocacy for this body. And I'm sure having been a member of this body helps. But it really is important that there be an organic relationship between the parliamentarians who represent the constituent members of NATO and NATO itself. And I think you've been a key part of that bridge, and we really appreciate it. And we appreciate your availability to us always. You know, when we hear from NATO spokespeople, up to and including the Secretary General, even though one member of NATO has so far blocked Sweden's accession to this body, nobody feels self-conscious about saying, and we hope soon, Sweden will be a member. This body had one concrete recommendation to the Madrid summit: create a Center for Democratic Resilience. Time to move beyond rhetoric and create architecture. The Congress of the United States passed a resolution supporting that. We don't often pass resolutions on NATO-related matters, but we did on that one, on a bipartisan basis. So help me understand why we can talk about Sweden being a member of this body, as it should be, irrespective of the fact that one member of the body is blocking it. And 30 of 31 ambassadors have agreed to the idea of creating a Center for Democratic Resilience, but we never hear NATO officials embrace that idea, even though only one member now stands between us and that idea. When are we going to start to hear from the Secretary General down the embracing of what we all say we subscribe to, shared democratic values? When are we going to put that into concrete action by actually creating architecture to operationalize that, to promote that, to defend it, to advocate for it? Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Andronius.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Deputy Secretary, my question is not a new one, but still relevant. We have been talking about invitation to Ukraine to join NATO, based on Ukraine meeting certain standards and fulfilling certain conditions. Could you tell who and when will develop the concrete list of these conditionalities? Thank you.
Thank you, Andronius. And
Mr. President, thank you. Dear Mr. Deputy Secretary General, 2 weeks ago, in one of the worst confrontations since Kosovo declared independence, a terrorist unit opened fire on a Kosovo police patrol and killed an officer. A few days later, Kosovo's interior minister accused Serbia of direct involvement in the shootout and told the press that Kosovo's authorities investigate the possibility of Russians' involvement in the violence. In addition, Kosovo's Minister of Foreign Affairs has even warned that such terrorist actions could even trigger and ignite a new war in the region, which would cause catastrophic consequences in the border, for the border European security and stability. I think we are taking Kosovo's problem and this terrorist attack very easily. You answered about KFOR already, but as a NATO, we are a bit lagging behind, and the other side, be it Russia itself or whoever, or some proxy of Russia, fuels the confrontation there and actually knows how to run asymmetric operations and how to undermine NATO as a security provider in the region. You know this region very well, so I would like for your comment about this situation. Thank you.
Thank you again to President Connolly. You know how much Secretary General, myself, all our teams, we are taking the issue of the values of this alliance, not only to the letter, but also to the very spirit of that thing. And of course, sometimes consensus-based organizations have their own specific way to operate. And this is something that we cannot substitute, the lack of consensus on any policy in NATO. But I can say again and again that in everything we do, even short of formalizing the recommendations of this great body, and we hope that this consensus would and could be reached, we are doing everything we can in making sure that the values part is embodied in everything we do, from building integrity to women, peace and security, from human security to everything we do. This is who we are, and this is not just an answer, a Q&A session here. This is who we are. We profoundly believe in the values that are underpinning our alliance, and we hope that we'll be able to find the consensus to move things forward. And of course, there was also a remark about the Washington summit. 75th anniversary of the foundation of the most successful alliance in history. We are so successful not only because we are strong in terms of defense, but also because we're united because of our values. So please consider that myself and our Secretary General, we are doing everything we can to encourage consensus and make sure that we distill in everything we do the fundamental values of our organization. Speaking of Sweden and the accession of Finland, in Madrid, both countries, both new candidate countries, were given candidate status in Madrid in record time. In record time. And I have to say, because he's not here, the Secretary General played a personal immense role in putting all the players together. And he spent hours, long hours, in Madrid itself to forge this consensus. The same thing happened in Vilnius. And I know that we'll be sparing no effort to making sure that the two remaining allies that have not yet ratified a Swedish accession will be in the position to do that as soon as possible. And again, our Secretary General, myself, our teams will be sparing no effort to making sure that we'll have this 32nd member, Sweden, a great new ally amongst our ranks. This leads to the question of our Lithuanian friends about NATO membership for Ukraine. I remember spending hours with President Zelensky in Vilnius because, to be honest, he was not very happy with what we are about to decide. And we spent hours with him, and other leaders spent hours with him, telling him that this is the fact that we are moving from 2 steps enlargement, so no membership action plan, like Sweden and Finland are doing, to 1. The creation of the Council, Ukraine-NATO Council, The fact that we are really working as equals, I'm telling you, it was a pleasure to see the Ukrainian representative sitting between Turkey and the UK, I think, alphabetically around the NATO table last week when I chaired. We are really going in that direction. It is not only a matter of conditions, technical conditions, because also Ukrainian friends and some of the allies say, let's not introduce additional bureaucratic checking boxes, because this is a political decision. We are all politicians here. This is a political decision. And when I mentioned in my speech fully interoperable with NATO, this is also a big component in that direction. I cannot say and prejudge when our leaders and you national parliaments will be in the situation to have consensus on this one, but I know that Ukraine is closer to us than ever, and I know that there are places with us. I also want to applaud European Union strategic courage and boldness in inviting Ukraine, Republic of Moldova, I hope also Georgia, and of course completing the work in the Western Balkans. This is also part of the trajectory of Ukraine. They are belonging with us, and I think we owe them everything we can to help them being with us, also in formal legal terms. So thank you so much for that question. When it comes to the Croatian question, it's clear that the Balkans, the Western Balkans, are a part of European architecture where Russia plays a very perfidious and malign influence. We have no evidence, direct evidence, through our intelligence, at least at this point, that there is a direct connection between what happened recently in Kosovo and Russia per se. But it's clear that there is some form of coordination among national or non-state actors, like the ones we have seen perpetrating these attacks. We also know that our allies and our partners in the region, they need our help more than ever. Because this hybrid toolbox is used against the Republic of Moldova like never before, short of military intervention, and the second part is Western Balkans when they use this many things they have. So we're counting on our allies in the region who know the region well. I know the region well. I care about the region well. I remember being chair of the OSCE, helping our North Macedonian friends keep the country together, and look that they are with us today. I know that this region will also be part of our family. And we keep a very vigilant eye on all interferences and influences in the region. And thank you for the questions.
Thank you. Next group, Matej Tonin from Slovenia, Niall Friedbertsson from Iceland, and Anne Jeanette from France. Matej.
Thank you, President. Deputy Secretary General. So Ukraine, Israel, Nagorno-Karabakh, Kosovo, and many places in Africa are right now hotspots where conflicts are intensifying. Capable and strong defense forces are the best deterrence, and strong deterrence is the best guarantee for peace and prosperity. But for building strong and reliable deterrence, defense spending is crucial. In the past, we had a Well Summit where we promised each other that we will reach 2% of GDP until 2024. The result is only 11 members reached this goal. We had a summit in Vilnius where we promised each other that we will spend at least 2%. So, in accordance with the past experience, how we can believe that this time we will fulfill our promises? My question is, will NATO Secretariat develop a tool where it will be able to assess the realistic approach of member countries to reach this 2% goal?
Niall?
Yes. Over here, Chair, Mr. Deputy Secretary General. I'm the rapporteur of a report on the protection of critical maritime infrastructure. And the high north, the Arctic, is home to undersea cables that carry a significant amount of global data flows, as well as oil and gas extraction and transportation routes. These undersea cables and infrastructure are vital for the security and defense of NATO member states. Is the protection of our critical maritime infrastructure in the high north on NATO's radar screen, and what can be done to improve the protection of this infrastructure? Thank you.
Anne?
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be speaking in French. Thank you, Deputy Secretary General, for being here with us today. Allow me to say that the French delegation condemns in the strongest possible way the attacks of Hamas on the State of Israel, and we fully support the State of Israel. Mr. Deputy Secretary General, you mentioned the European Union on several occasions in your briefing. I'd like to ask you a question. Complementarity between NATO and the EU is essential to have decisive and sustainable support to Ukraine. Our both organizations have demonstrated how their actions can have added value and mutually reinforce each other. NATO has focused on collective defense and deterrence and defense and stronger defense of its eastern flank and in the Western Mediterranean. The European Union has been able to mobilize sanctions, support to its partners, and the coordination of material support to Ukraine. On the 10th of January last, the third declaration between NATO and EU was signed, and this is my question, and it reaffirmed a more operational defense, strengthening global security and transatlantic link, and a need for interoperability with NATO. A roadmap to translate the commitments of that third declaration seems to have been sent to the NATO IS. Can you tell us when that roadmap will be implemented and what it will entail? Thank you.
For the question. First, to our Slovenian friends and allies on defense spending. I'll give you a political/strategic answer. The difference between Wales and Vilnius is that the world has changed. That Prime Minister Frederiksen said that we are naive. Probably we thought that lasting peace is with us for decades. It was not. We all believed and we all collected the dividends of peace. That's why this big asymmetry between what our US allies and other allies will be doing for decades. This time is different, not only because our leaders undertook a solemn obligation in Vilnius, but because the situation requires that from us, to defend us, to help our Ukrainian partners, and to be able to cope with the new definition of security. It's a different world. And national security and defense costs money. And we just cannot do without that. And I know that this will be the case. As you know, the most, I would say, influential public tool the Secretary General has is the annual report on defense spending by all allies. It's public, 2% and 20%. I also have to say something which is not that in the headlines, that in our new cycle of NATO defense planning, our NDPP cycle, all these commitments, more forces, more technology, more multi-domain, more space and cyber, everything will be part of the NATO defense planning. This adds to the regional plans that we have approved in Vilnius, and also General Lavinio and his team are conducting the NWCC, which is the digital transformation and the adaptation of NATO to new technologies. So the only thing I'm not that concerned that allies will not be living up to their commitment. The concern that we should have that we spend the taxpayers' money properly, efficiently, and coherently. And not only as allies individually, but as an alliance collectively. And this is also economy of scale. This is also better spending. And this is why we are so confident that this alliance all allies will be living up to their commitments. But also not only invest 2% or more. Poland, it's impressive. Or Iceland. They have no military forces, but they are so active in supporting Ukraine with military transport, with infrastructures that they host. So all of us will need to do a better job. We'll have more money, but we have to make sure that that money, which is difficult money from our taxpayers, is spent properly, wisely, and coherently. And I know that NATO will play its role in making sure that this really happens. To our Icelandic friends and allies, I'm very grateful to Norway and Germany when they came forward, I think one year ago, Silke? Más o menos, more or less, in proposing that NATO takes, it was after Nord Stream 1 and 2, that it was obvious that our critical infrastructures undersea are vulnerable and we have to do something to protect them. And I remember I chaired the North Atlantic Council, where we invited the CEO of the Swedish electrical company, the CEO of the Norwegian oil company, and the chief engineer of Google, the largest owner of undersea fiber optic cables in the world. And I am proud to report to you, my dear friends from the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, that in record time, we have established a critical undersea protection cell in Marcom, in our Maritime Command, and where our military leaders, our industry, Denmark is a big place for huge global logistics, will be working together in making sure that we work with industry and governments and NATO to make sure that we have the right redundancy, that we have the same capacity to understand the risk, and to basically differentiate between what would be, let's say, a benign incident, some fishermen boats or things like that, and an aggressive Russian or others attempt to disrupt our critical infrastructures. So I'm just happy to report to you that in record time, we've been adjusting to this new situation. And also because you are, I understand from your president and from other friends in the room, that you're preparing lots of partnership reports and policies. And we are ready to engage also in that. When I was talking to friends from the Gulf, from friends from the Middle East, even to our only partner in Latin America, Colombia, when they heard about NATO doing more on critical infrastructure undersea, they all were interested. Because irrespective who could be the perpetrator or the disruptor of those things, there's an interest in the knowledge that we have in NATO. So I'm just saying that this could be a nice hook, if you want. No suggestion from us. We respect the division of labor. Even if like President Connolly said, I trust in the organic link between the two sides of the same house. So yes, we are making progress, and we count also on Iceland to be contributing actively to this effort. Pour nos amis alliés français, vous savez comment.
To our French ally, well, you know very well that the organization I represent sees the European Union as the key strategic partner for NATO. We are both sides of the same coin. Of course, the membership of the two organizations is different, but the values embodied and the geopolitical context in which both organizations navigate is the same. Therefore, we do need a very strong transatlantic link, but we also need a strong role to be played by the European Union in the constellation and in the efforts we make. I am extremely proud that President Ursula von der Leyen and our SecGen managed to sign a third joint declaration in which we have 5 new areas of activities: cyber resilience, new technologies, space, climate. Climate and security is one of the main issues for NATO, and there the EU has specific tools, and this is why in Brussels about 3 months ago we had a meeting between Frans Timmermans before he left his then position to go to the Netherlands, with John Kerry and a number of other people to work together on to see how to do things together in the run-up to COP28 in the UAE. So there is synergy, and we're very happy to have that synergy. On resilience, which is, of course, a national competency without a doubt, there is a cross-border dimension for both NATO and EU, because, you know, resilience is not limited to the sheer geography of one nation's borders. So that is why we have created a task force, a very strong working party between the European Commission and the NATO headquarters on resilience. And there we have a lot of elements of synergy to be found, of course, respecting the prerogatives of both the member states, the tools of the European Union, and, of course, the tremendous added value that NATO can bring to the table of that resilience. So trust that we do not see a beauty contest between both NATO and EU. We need everybody's goodwill because the democratic world needs these kind of synergies and cooperation. And myself, the SecGen, and our teams back at headquarters are trusted partners who have that philosophy in mind, who work on that basis, and who want to invest in this very close connection between NATO and the EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We go to the next group, Jeroen van Wijngaarden from Netherlands, Jukka Kopra from Finland, and Cesar Mogo from Spain. Jeroen, we will start.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Secretary General, for the determination in your speech. The Netherlands is as determined as you are to continue to support Ukraine to defend itself against Russian terror. However, Putin's bet is that war fatigue will take control of us allies. Therefore, the question arises how to prove Putin wrong. Shouldn't we give a more long-term reassurance to Ukraine with a longer time horizon, or better, no time horizon at all? I'm looking forward to your answer. After all, what we need is a relentless pursuit to a victory for the rules-based order, a victory for peace, and finally, a victory for Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Jukka?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Deputy Secretary General. As a frontline nation, Finland finds it very important that Sweden's accession to NATO would be as quick as possible. I would like to know if Sweden's NATO accession will not realize soon, what effect will that have on NATO's defense planning regarding the Baltic Sea and Nordic region? Thank you.
Thank you, Cesar.
Hablaré en español.
I will be speaking in Spanish. Thank you, Deputy Secretary General, for your words, and thank you to all delegations for this rejection that the Spanish delegation joins on this unjustified and horrible attack against Israel. And in our solidarity with Ukraine, there cannot be fatigue. We cannot waver in our support of Ukraine and its people. I would like you to expand on the Sahel, please, Mr. Deputy Secretary General, the outlook that NATO gave at the Madrid summit to the southern flank. Since 2020, there's been 8 military coups. There's been a disconcerted response. There is strong democratic institutions. There's food insecurity, but also Russia apparently, and it seems obviously, have also interfered, other actors too, that demand that we do not lose sight of this complicated and upended region that, of course, is of the greatest interest to the countries in the south. I would like you to please give me some answer on your opinion on the matter. Thank you very much.
To our Dutch friends and allies, we are living in democracies. And democracy is not an autocratic regime where you can basically ignore the views of your public opinion. So us as political leaders, we have always have to find ways to continue to communicate to our public opinions and of course to our national parliaments and to our national governments and to our media and to our social media if we can, why it is so important for Ukraine to prevail in this war.
And this is a case to be made. For the ones concerned about the rise of China, there is an obvious argument that China is watching carefully what we do and what we don't do, what we are committing to be doing and what we are not delivering upon what we commit to be doing. Because everyone is watching Ukraine not only with the lenses of European security, as we do, that's our job, but also through the lenses of the world order in the making or in the remaking as we speak. This is also important when it comes to whatever ideas China might have in the South China Sea, when it comes to Taiwan. If we had these difficulties with Russian gas and cutting or finding alternatives to Russian gas, imagine what would happen if a semiconductor industry in Taiwan would be disrupted from the world economy, what that would mean. So I'm not improvising here arguments, but I'm saying that Ukraine is important morally, strategically, politically in itself. But the consequences of the way in which we support and Ukraine prevails, or God forbid, fails in this war, will have global consequences, not only for us, but also for the rest of the world. We always say what is happening in Europe today could happen in East Asia and the Pacific tomorrow. Of course, when it comes to us in Europe and a continent that has been, over centuries, part of this sphere of influence kind of thing. I believe that the idea that we give, even indirectly, even by passivity, the right of Russia to have its own sphere of influence as a definition is countering everything we hold dear. The UN Charter, NATO's Washington Treaty, European Union's treaties. So I think we have still arguments to make. Winter is coming, which is no surprise, not only in Ukraine, but also in Europe will be probably, again, a conversation about inflation and energy prices. So this will not be an easy conversation for us. I hope and I know that we'll be able to prevent war fatigue, but we know that it's more difficult for us to keep this level of commitment than it is for the other guys to do the same. So the sooner we anchor Ukraine into Europe and to the Euro-Atlantic family, one or another, I think this will also be an important dimension of that issue. Now, from our Finnish friends and newest allies, I know that Sweden will be joining ranks, and I cannot tell when, because that's a matter of national sovereign decision of the remaining allies. But I know they are invited to every single council I chair or Secretary General chairs. They're becoming more intimate as we speak. I mentioned the NATO Industry Forum. So I would say that they are so close to us that now it's more of a political, final, important steps for them to be formally part of the alliance. But I think in spirit and in practical terms, they are already very close to us. And of course, the Baltic Sea and the Nordic Sea, the North regional plans, the northern part, will be taking the important role of Sweden and the one of Finland into the new equation. That's massively important for us. So we have keep full confidence, and we work relentlessly. The Secretary General is investing a lot of his political capital and time to making sure that we get this 32nd ally on board as soon as possible. Para los amigos y aliados españoles, I mentioned in my speech,
and for our Spanish allies,
is something which is, in my view, in our view, is immensely important to our security. And I'm applauding the fact that many of the allies, including in Madrid at the summit, including in Vilnius, they re-emphasize the importance of this part. I will make one comment. I mentioned the Mediterranean dialogue. In Madrid, our leaders took a very important decision to help Mauritania with a defense capability package, DCB package. I can say here, because you also have the strings of the purse, indirectly at least, that we have not delivered yet on our promises that our leaders took almost 1.5 years ago back in Madrid to Mauritania. The only country probably in the Sahel that is still solid, relatively solid, and also willing to work with us. So I think we have to do much more. I'm not here to plead for NATO in the Sahel. It's complicated, but I'm saying once we have a partnership with let's prove them, as Prime Minister Frederick said, let's really show that our offer is better than the other one. There's still a lack of coordination between what we do nationally and multinationally, EU, NATO, bilaterally. The other thing that I would like to mention is the fact that, especially now with the situation in Gaza, and also we see Hezbollah trying to do also damage from the other side. We have 4 joint partners between NATO and the EU. The Republic of Moldova, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Jordan, and Tunisia in the south. Nothing should stop us to work together, and nos amis alliés ont mentionné ça,
as mentioned by our French allies,
try to showcase in Jordan, in Tunisia, in Mauritania, where we have partnerships today, that we can do and we should do much more. And I really hope that in the summit we have in Washington, we'll be putting not only more language, but also more money, and also more coherence, and also more real commitment to these countries. I mentioned terrorism, I mentioned climate change and security, you mentioned food security. Migration is still a huge challenge that is coming, and politically speaking is such a sensitive issue for us in Europe or America. So I'm just saying that we should try really to do not only write papers, have final communiques, but really help them become stronger and less fragile. And I believe that on the way to the Washington summit together, we'll be able to really show our southern partners that we are really living up to our promises, and we understand the geostrategic consequences of not doing enough in the south, as well as we do for Ukraine, as we do when it comes to China, new technologies. That's also a very important part of the Washington summit decisions, I hope.
Okay, I invite now Joe Wilson from United States to put his question. Also, after that, Alberto Losacco from Italy and Aki Matilda Högdam from Denmark.
Mr. President, what an honor to be here. And it's actually been so reassuring, Secretary General, Mr. President, everyone, the Prime Minister, the Speaker. Indeed, we're in a conflict of dictatorships, rule of gun, opposing democracy's rule of law. And this weekend, it's really become clear with the murderous attack on Israel. It's really inseparable from what is occurring in Ukraine. But sadly, too, the Chinese Communist Party has plans with the largest military peacetime buildup in history. And so we need to be ever prepared. I'm really concerned about fatigue, indeed, but sadly in America, we have persons who believe that the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean is sufficient for isolationism. And so we need your help. And one way to do that is for every country to achieve their 2%. Because the people, quote, on the other side, the isolationists say that our allies are not pulling their weight. And then we have countries that are making a difference, Turkey, with their efforts to promote grain. So with that, in lieu of a question, it's just been so reassuring to see so many extraordinary people make it very clear that we stand with Ukraine, the people of Ukraine. Thank you.
Aki Matilda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Esteemed colleagues, I'm honored to be here as a representative of Greenland elected to the Danish Parliament. I would first like to thank Mr. President and the Danish Prime Minister for emphasizing the importance of the Arctic region during this assembly. Greenland holds a unique perspective on the Arctic, where security and climate change is not only topics of discussion, but a way of life for our people. Today, I stand before you with a sense of pride and unity, as we have the privilege of hosting the NATO Assembly with the Greenlandic national parliamentarians among us as observers for the first time in history. However, many of you may have noticed that they sit in the back of this room, somewhat removed from the main deliberations. In the spirit of democracy and inclusivity, we must remember that these parliamentarians represent a sense of a vital source of knowledge and first-hand experience when it comes to Arctic affairs. Their insights are not just valuable, they are essential. I believe that we as a democratic organization should uphold the principles of direct engagement and inclusivity, ensuring that every NATO member organization within this interact with the Greenlandic colleagues on Arctic matters. To further strengthen the spirit of cooperation, I propose that we as NATO should aspire to a future where Greenlandic national parliamentarians can sit with us at the table as full participants. This would not only be a symbolic gesture, but it would be a tangible step towards embracing the invaluable insights and perspective they may offer. It would demonstrate our commitment to addressing Arctic security, upcoming new shipping routes in a way that environmental concerns and the challenges faced by the Greenlandic people and the people of the Arctic with the most inclusivity and respect for democracy. Thank you.
Alberto?
Thank you. I will speak in Italian, but first I think Ms. Herziana for the reference to the Italian commitment in Bulgaria. La guerra all'Ucraina ovviamente.
War in Ukraine obviously required us to focus on strategies of the alliance on the eastern flank. Currently, our attention is focused on the Middle East with the attack against our partner Israel, which Italy has also promptly condemned. We cannot make the mistake of neglecting, however, what's happening in Africa, particularly in the sub-Saharan area. As was often stressed by the alliance, this shows that the southern flank is an essential area. Niger was the last country which had not been